Okay, we are live. Thank you again, Professor Mohammed, for joining us today, and thank you to everyone who's watching this conversation live, whether that be on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. I'll just begin with a brief introduction of Dr. Mohammed Hassan. He was born to an Oromo peasant family. He was educated um, He was educated both in Ethiopia and England. He received his doctorate degree in African history from the University of London, and Dr. Hassan taught African and world history in Atlanta University, Morehouse College, Hunter College, City University of New York, as well as at Georgia State University. Dr. Hassen has published 2 books and edited 4 others with his colleagues, and published hundreds of articles and book chapters in the field of Oromo and Ethiopian studies. He is one of the founding members of the Oromo Studies Association, as well as its scholarly organ, the Journal of Oromo Studies. And I will be your host today, Ayantu Kabeda, and we can go ahead and get started into our discussion. So to begin, I recently was able to watch one of your interviews that you did with Finfinne News Network, in which you talked about how currently the Prime Minister Abiy is attempting to kind of restore the old ways of Ethiopia. And because of this, we're seeing so much of the conflict that we see today. And I was wondering if you could elaborate briefly on the tactics that are being used in order to attempt this restoration and to accomplish it as well.
Ayantu, thank you very much for your generous but unnecessary introduction. If you say much, that is plenty, that is adequate. Thank you for the question. As a historian, as someone who was trained as a historian and taught for many years, we always start when we start a new subject with background information so that the students or the public will have really clear understanding of what is to be discussed. So I want to start with background information briefly before attempting to answer your question. And for the audience, I suspect some of you may know, probably others may not know, before 1880s, the overwhelming majority of the Oromo lived in independence. They had their own governments, whether these were Gada republics, where the Oromo came together through the Chafe Assembly, the parliament elected the leaders who led them for 8 years period. Under Gada Republic, any leader will be in power only for a fixed period of 8 years. Just look, just it cuts out competition over power. If in Oromia the Gada system is adopted, this endless fighting over who will be the next leader, the next group that will dominate society, will really be eliminated. Why do I mention this? The future of our people depends on the restoration of the Gada system. What happened to the Gada system? I will mention that in a minute. But as I have said, our people lived in independence, deciding on their own destiny, electing their own. Oromo developed monarchic institution, Moti, but still they practiced the Gada system. I don't have to dwell much on that. The Oromo were conquered for various reasons, mainly because they lacked modern firepower. It was really firepower, introduction of firepower, that changed the course of history in the country known as Ethiopia. Our people did not have access to it and probably did not appreciate it very much. And of all Oromo kings, there were several Oromo kings. Abba Jifar, some of you must have heard, the king of Jimma, the kingdom of Jimma, in 1882 had about 30,000 soldiers. But he had only 30 matchlocks. All at time, Menelik had already about 30,000 guns. Just imagine absolutely how guns really changed the course of history. Let me make one statement. I actually quote it from the book by Professor Tashale Tibabu. He says, which is true, modern Ethiopia was established on the destruction of Oromo power. Absolutely true. Powerful people, self-respecting people, people who were respected by their own neighbors, people who are today the most humiliated, the most despised people in that country. I'll deal with that later on. Everywhere the Oromo resisted, but they were ultimately defeated. And after defeat, the Oromo lost their sovereignty, their independence. Sovereignty is the right to decide one's own destiny. Live under their own people chose, basically. The moment people lose destiny, they are removed from history. Instead of the makers of history, they become the object of history. Not only that, which is absolutely crucial, the moment people lose their sovereignty, they lose control of their own matters. Their property will be confiscated, their land will be confiscated, every aspect dehumanized, will be undermined, every aspect, their language, anything, everything they have will be undermined. The Oromo not only lost a precious thing, which was sovereignty, but also their land. And I want everyone to underline this one because there is a battle going on for Oromo land. Essentially, the war that is going on everywhere in Oromia today is the battle for land. I'll explain that later on. This generation probably will not understand what is meant by Gabbar. Gabbars were serfs. If you check the dictionary definition, serfs were human beings who were tied to the land. They were basically the owners of their masters. The Oromo people were distributed among settlers, government officials, even church officials. They were distributed. Two simple examples. Ras, most of young people may not know what is meant Ras. Under the Abyssinian system, the Tigrayans Amhara system, Ras is the highest title after Prince. Prince is at the top, then Ras, then the Jazmach, then Fiturari Kanyazmach. You know, all those were uprooted in 1974. A Dejazmach was given 1,000 gabbars. Why 1,000 gabbars? Because they had camp followers, they had their own soldiers. In those days, in that country, then known as Abyssinia, salaries were never paid. How was salaries paid for soldiers, for warriors, for those who conquer and then occupy territories? It was the Oromo peasants, the Sidama peasants, the Walaita, the Kaficho peasants who were given in lieu of salary. Their land were given to the settlers as a salary. They depended on them. It was our people who farmed, who harvested, who grinded, our women who grinded the corn. Remember, in those days, there were no grinding mills. And it was the burden of Oromo women for grinding that. And then a peasant will to take with a mule to the home of the settler. You may not believe this. Some of you may think I'm exaggerating. Mules were or donkeys were not allowed to enter the house of the settler, and the Oromo peasant who brought the grain, honey, butter, and other things enter that house, which meant our people were basically regarded as human cattle, human property that were essentially used for the survival of the settlers. Let me quickly go to the next one. Remember, during the war, there were many prisoners who were enslaved. Forget about those who were killed, but those who were enslaved. Let me give you just two examples. Many conducted a war among RC Oromo. It lasted for 7 years without having a single gun. They defeated Menelik 3 times. One time they drove him all the way to Mojo, the town which is now known as Mojo, all the way up to that area. But ultimately they were defeated. Why do I mention this? A British explorer who passed through RC land only 4 years, a devastating war, he says, here in RC land, people are sold in the marketplaces. This is not me speaking. I am quoting from an English traveler. And in Harar area, it was, after the Battle of Chalanko, it was exactly the same thing. The soldiers raided, captured cattle, and captured human beings also as slaves, which were sold in the marketplace. The point I wanted to leave with you, because Emperor Menelik was a role model for Abiy. Menelik's higher officials, they all owned slaves. Menelik, let me give you only 3 examples. Menelik, the Christian emperor of the empire he created by 1900, I mean only 120 years ago, he owned 70,000 slaves. Some of them were Oromo, others were other conquered people, especially from Kafa, Walaita, Sidama, several other areas. 70,000. I have been teaching world history for 3 decades. And I have not read everything, but I have read about slavery in ancient Rome, Greece, in Europe. Slavery existed in Europe. And of course, in the Americas afterwards, I have not come across an example where a single individual owns about 70,000 human beings. Raswal de Gorgis, a relative of Menelik, owned 20,000 slaves. I am not sure if most of the audience probably remembers this name, Tafari Mokonnan, the Yadmach Ras Tafari Mokonnan. who later on made himself emperor. When his father died in 1906, Tafari inherited 7,500 slaves from his father. Why do I mention this? Slaves were basically property that passes from father to son to daughter to everything. And Tafari, who later became Ras Tafari, who was the dominant figure in the political landscape of that country after 1916 when he overthrew Iyasu, the legitimate king. He owned slaves, thousands of slaves, meet his country into the League of Nations. His country at the time was known as Abyssinia, and that country was admitted to the League of Nations in 1924 under the name of Abyssinia. If anyone who wants to check, just Google the League of Nations that was established after the First World War, and then go through the list of the names of countries. The only country was Abyssinia. It was under the name of Abyssinia. The country was admitted into the League of Nations. It was only by the constitution which Haile Selassie, who made himself emperor in 1930, in 1931, he issued the first constitution, and it was that constitution which defined the country as Ethiopia. Even that constitution divided the population of the country into two classes. The natives, anyone who study African history or native Indian life, the moment the British refer to the natives, it means the colonized population. Everywhere in Africa during the colonial period, the local people were referred to as the natives. The Haile Selassie's constitution characterized the conquered people of southern Ethiopia as natives, recognizing that it was an empire, basically an empire. The second group were subjects. Basically, these were the Habashas, the Abyssinians, the Tigrayans, and the Amara. They are now in a very strict that aspect. Um, what is most important for us to remember is only two things here. Menelik's empire was based on the Gabbar system and the slavery. Both were abolished by the Italians in 1936. I have a book here on my shelf. It's the book clearly shows when the Italians freed slaves, 2 million human beings were given freedom. 2 million human beings. Undermined. Even was restored by the British to power in 1941, slavery continued in that country. The second one is in 1900, Emperor Menelik, by decree, by law, banned the gathering of Chafe assembly, basically effectively destroying the Gada system. He banned the Oromo pilgrimage to the land of Abamuda in southern Oromia, in southern part of Oromia, essentially eliminating, and the Orthodox Church condemned the Irrecha festival. All the point is all Oromo institutions after the conquest were undermined. Essentially, the goal was very simple: to make sure that the Oromo lose confidence as people in themselves, in their institution, abandon it, and then adopt their system. There was also an obvious attack on Oromo language, Oromo national humility, the Oromo were simply humiliated to hate themselves so that they abandon their identity. And we can clearly still see, almost 100 years later, the effect of that on some elements of Oromo society. Even unbelievable ideological war was conducted against the Oromo, and it was created in a new form under Colonel Abiy. I told you a minute. You know, we all know Colonel Abiy. It was only four and something, some months ago, Abiy came to power. It was with huge sacrifice of our youth, Cairo and the Carres. Probably 5 to 7,000 lost their lives, about 30,000 wounded. And it was this sacrifice which brought about change, forced the TPLF leaders to pack up and go back to and it was the previous leaders under the TPLF leaders. Basically, it was individuals who were killers, jailers, who were selling Oromo land, who took over the government in Oromia. Honestly, I have no interest in exaggerating, but telling what happened. The previous killers, the people who were selling the land of our people, who were displacing, who were imprisoning our people, people who committed the action of October 2nd, 2016, they were in power. Not a single individual who were responsible for that crime were ever brought to justice. They took over, Abiy came, and the first day he spoke at the parliament, he glorified Emperor Menelik, the man I have mentioned who owned 70,000 slaves, who banned all Oromo institutions, who basically dehumanized the Oromo nation. Under him, the Oromo lost their land, their identity, their every aspect. A normal human being would not idealize either Haile Selassie or Emperor Menelik, and Abiy even topped it by building statues at millions of dollars at the palace for Emperor uh, Menelik and Haile Selassie. Why does he do that? Because wanted to him, it was the system under which power is centralized and controlled by one individual. I was born and grew up under Haile Selassie. When I was at Haile Selassie University in the 1970s, it was not permissible to broadcast in Oromo language, to preach, to teach, to publish anything. In fact, it was never allowed to develop before 1991. Just mark that aspect. Never allowed. It was the change in 1974, which, for the first time, the military regime declared that the Oromo will have the opportunity, Oromo language program for 1 hour. Just a language program. Writing, if it has to be written, it has to be written in Semitic alphabet. That is Sabian alphabet. I have nothing against that, but the Sabian alphabet is really not meant for Cushitic language speakers. Essentially, it does not suit. What suits the Oromo language is the Latin alphabet. So many countries in Africa, even now in that country, the Somalis, the Sidama, the Oromo, the Afar, they use Latin alphabet for writing in their language. What was most attacked? It is about the Oromo use of Latin alphabet. And Colonel Abiy, immediately after he came to power, the target was actually to ban the use of Latin alphabet for the Oromo language, starting from last September. Everywhere in Oromia, Oromo children have started learning first in Amharic. Children, young children, if they are exposed to two languages at the same time, they will focus mainly on the dominant language. Restoring grammar study, learning language is useful, but psychological studies everywhere in the world clearly shows children up to the age of 8, 9, until they reach the age of 4, if they develop their language, they build confidence in themselves, in their institution, in their way of life. If they are exposed to another one, that will be utterly undermined. The goal of now introducing Amharic from first grade, we not use 7 years under the TPLF domination, was basically to kill the Oromo language, absolutely kill the Oromo language. Um, Honest to God, I have absolutely no doubt if the current trend continues, within few short years, the Oromo language will not be taught in school. There will not be any literature. Why do I mention this? Only language for which is speak for survival, only that language survives. If people do not protect their language will not survive. It is the speakers of that language who have to protect their own language. Finally, let me come to Abiy's war against the Oromo, which is absolutely crucial. And then I'll answer your question. Months after Abiy came to power, he established an illegal, it was never done through the parliament, an illegal, during the time of Wayane, whenever command posts were established, it actually came through the parliament. At least they used the legal cover. Abiy even did not care to do that, and he established command posts in Walaga, in Arsi. Today, most parts of Oromia are under command posts. Why do I mention command posts? Basically, there is no rule of law. There has never been a time when there is rule of law in Ethiopia, but at least wild killing was not there. And what Abiy established was really instituting that. And in Walaga first, in Guji area, now in the center, everywhere actually, there is massive killing going on everywhere in Oromia. All of you who clearly, this is part of the plan. The plan is to crush Oromo resistance, destroy the backbone of Oromo resistance. That is what Abiy promised 3 years ago when he said in a meeting of 50 individuals, if the Oromo do not do what I ask them to do, I will make sure they will never rise up again in 1,000 years. I have never seen in human history a leader who will say he will discipline that they will not rise in another 1,000 years. Meaning he wanted to commit genocide. The genocide he committed in Tigray, the genocide he is carrying now, his soldiers are carrying, the criminal elements from everywhere are carrying it. Basically, it is destroying the Oromo population. Will he be able to do that? I hope not. And if our people support Wabo, there is no return to the past. Take this from me, absolutely. If our people resist, there is no return to the past. Let me only mention one sad thing. Remember earlier I said Abiy came to power through the sacrifice of Kairos and the Karres, who was the first person in that country to rise as manga. If you speak Amharic, you clearly understand what is meant by manga. Basically, herds. He removed them from plane of humanity. Today, there are probably more than 50,000 Kairos in prison. And what truly angers me more than anything, whenever someone is imprisoned by any government in the world, it is the responsibility of that government to protect the people who are under their control. We have the names of several Kairos who have been taken out of prison during the night, taken to the forest. They were not only executed, Ayantu, it really angers me to say this. They cut their head, their hands, their legs, and then scatter in the forest. The goal is to terrorize the population. But this is a crime against humanity. This is Abiy's government, which is committing what was never done even by Menelik, by Haile Selassie, by the military regime. This is, if our people live under this system, their future is nothing but dark, honest to God. Today, Oromia is, I will stop on this point, is a battleground for land. What the enemies of the Oromo want is really Oromo resources, Oromo land, not the Oromo people. Please underline this. Not the Oromo people. The Oromo people have never been considered as the legitimate citizens of the land. Even the hooligans, these talking heads in the country, Abiy financed media camp war. If you follow what you see on media in Fine, you clearly see there are people who are paid daily for insulting the Oromo, their way of life, as if they were newcomers to the country, which is absolutely not true. As part of the Kushatic language speakers, the Oromo are one of the most indigenous population of that country, essentially. But there was a movement in the 16th century about the Oromo military activities. His date goes back to 1522. From 1522 to 2022, it is 500 years. Even if we forget the previous history of the Oromo, as part of indigenous Kushatic speaking population, scholarship clearly shows the birthplace of is today northern Sudan, the eastern coast of Sudan, what is today Eritrea, and then the rest, the central areas, essentially. Just imagine, even if they lived there for 500 years, the elite, the Amhara elite simply say, oh, they are mate, they are newcomers. Remember, we all are newcomers to the United States. Some of us have been here for 40 years. We are full citizens of this country. And the Oromo who have been there for thousands of years, and even from their records, 500 years, they are still not regarded as full citizens. Not long ago, there was a demonstration in Finfinne, actually in 2019, organized by, financed actually by Abiy's regime, where our people were insulted with the derogatory old name of dehumanizing, use that name. It was the name invented basically for cutting down Oromo humanity. And they were saying, go back to Madagascar, which is actually silly, essentially. Um, this is nothing but madness, honest to God. And the war that is going on is the battle for Oromo land. I will return to that with your next question. Now let me try to answer your question. And you said, you asked me about the tactics Abiy is using for restoring Menelik's system. The one thing he did was to establish Bilsigana party. The language of Bilsigana is Amharic. Abiy has said openly in public, we live in one country, we have to speak in one language. Most people may not realize in India, the largest democracy in 27 republics, most of them use different language operating, even using different script, different writing system. Did that undermine Indian democracy? Absolutely no. Why does it undermine Ethiopia? It is a fiction basically created. What Abiy wanted simply is using the military means for ending his own dictatorship. This man, personally, I don't know him. It is his policy I hate. It is his policy of basically destroying everyone. All his life, I can't say all his life, he joined the military at the age of 14, and for almost 3 decades, he spent in the military, mainly in the security. This is a man who never went beyond 7th grade, never completed beyond 7th grade. But he claims to have first degree, and there is no evidence for it. To have 2 master's degrees, evidence is not shown. His dissertation is by individuals who wrote it, and it was plagiarized. There are 18 paragraphs in that dissertation which were plagiarized in any university on the face of earth, at least in North America, in Europe, Australia, in South Africa, in India itself. Any dissertation that is plagiarized, 18 paragraphs will automatically be removed. And in university, the officials, if they do that, next day they will be either in jail or they will be executed. Abiy has executed so many individuals. Essentially, the tactics he is using is killing. You may not believe, Ayantu, I know for certain 100% there are killing squads in every towns all over Oromia. It may be everywhere. Who killed the population at Tole? I mentioned there. The news that is now coming out is it was the government who organized it, essentially. They did the same thing at Guluso before they started the Tigray war. They killed the Amharic speakers who have lived with the Oromos for decades, and then blame it on Ola. Truth, you may suppress it for a while, but it comes out. Abiy created a killing machine as a student of history, honest to God, I don't remember any time when our people have been subjected to so many killings, when people are burned with their houses. Even Menelik's soldier did not burn people with their houses. They burned thousands of houses, no doubt. But they were yelling, underline this, they were yelling, and the people will run away from the place. Abiy's soldiers, because he wanted to terrorize us, they burn people with their houses. What is most awful, a 7 months pregnant woman was burned with her house. A mother of 7 in Benishangul, an Oromo woman, was beheaded as if she was a god. Do you believe a mother of 7 beheaded? This is the tactics he is using. Goal is to kill as much as possible. Basically, the reign of terror.
Mm.
You can't travel anywhere. And why is he doing this? First and foremost, to establish Menelik's system, which was based on one language, one identity, one culture. Whose culture, whose identity it is very clear. It is the Amhara identity, every aspect. In this, nothing about the Oromo will be reflected. Our people will be allowed to, but they will never be allowed to develop their language, to feel pride in their cultural heritage. It is a repeat of what happened to our people 150, 140 years ago that Abiy is trying to restore. Will he succeed? I hope he will never succeed. Our people, I hope, will never allow this genocidal regime to not only destroy, they plunder their resources and then lose everything they have. Our people have only one thing, it is the land. There has never been land confiscation, land selling as it is. Remember what inspired the Cairo and the Carre movement was the land confiscation around Finfinne. Today it is 20 or 30 times higher than what happened under the TPLF. You just can't compare Abiy's mafia, this killer an organization called Bilsigna, which doesn't have any ideology. The ideology is basically plundering. It is the den. It is the organization for criminals, whether it is the Amara region or other Oromia region. These were the same people who were oppressing population under the TPLF. Abiy bringing only someone who does not understand the magnitude of Abiy is creating in that country. Hope it is only a dream that Abiy will bring Bilsigna. Bilsigna is a dream that will never be realized under the system created by Colonel Abiy. I will be ready to answer your second question.
Okay. Thank you for that very thorough um, response to our first question. You touched on this briefly when you were answering the first question, but I wanted to see your perspective on how Ethiopia differs from other African nations and other nations around the world in which there are multiple ethnic groups living together, um, but are still able to function differently than what we've seen now. And you, again, you've touched on this, but if you can elaborate more on how that the ability to coexist with other ethnic groups ties into the conflict that we see today, and if maybe there's similarities, differences with other nations.
Question. Have you traveled to Europe?
No, I have not.
Okay, okay. You know, Belgium is a very small country. There are three official languages in Belgium. In Switzerland, there are three official languages.
Mm.
It is not a diversity of language that divides population. It is the mindset of population because they don't want other language inherited. It's as simple as that. What makes Ethiopia different, especially from other African countries? I, um, I honestly, I don't know any elite in Africa that says we own the state. In Ethiopia, there is an elite that says our forefathers created Ethiopia. It is our own property, and it is us who decides on the fate of that country. Others are nothing, basically. This notion of Ethiopians, no, it is just really, it doesn't have any depth, essentially.
Mm.
The mindset of this elite that claims to own the state, the source of all problems emanate from that. They understand. What is the background to the war in Tigray? Basically, it is two. One, they wanted to destroy Tigray as a power center, crush their military at any cost, committing genocide, and then capturing Raya and Western Tigray.
Mm.
It is the battle for land. What about the Oromia special zone in Wallo area, where colonel minimum of 80, 80 drones dropped bombs in that area, where only about 4 million people live? What is behind it? It is started a bit earlier. What is behind it? They really wanted the population in that area, in that special zone, to abandon their religion and to deny that they are no longer. They have to change their identity. What happened to the people in Wallo 100 years earlier, especially in the 1880s? It's a long history. I will not bore you with that. But there was several wars, first conducted by Theodorus, followed by Johannes, and then by Menelik. Basically, the result of that one was destroying the leadership. Most of the people in Wallo were Oromo speakers, and they were forced to accept Christianity. Most of them were Muslims. Some actually migrated to the Sudan. Others came all the way to the Gibe region in the Jimma area. Others came to Hararge, Charchar area. Some on a small scale to RC area, from that area. Those who could not endure the double pain, forcing you to change your identity and then abandoning your religion, somewhere, of course, involved. And it is that which is still going on. Where does it come from? It comes from the mindset which says Ethiopia is ours,
Mm.
essentially ours. It belongs only to them. Others are there to serve their interest. No people on earth would accept this kind of things. And what makes it so fundamentally different is there has no I don't remember any time. Only when they are defeated or they are weak, they talk about compromise. The moment they gain power, issues, as a student of history, I have known Abyssinian history probably since 1270, when the Amara dynasty was first established. Since then, there was no when issues were discussed, compromise reached, and solved through concession and compromise. That is not part of the culture.
Mm.
It is the culture of winner take all. If you are weak, you compromise. The moment you gain power, you crush, you establish by force. I don't know any other country, probably Burma, where this kind of culture is in operation. And it is this which really makes me pessimist. Under this mindset, under this system, anyone who really expects Ethiopia to become a democracy is fooling oneself.
Mm.
The concept of democracy is based first and foremost on respecting the rights of population. Respecting everyone is equal. There are no hierarchies of classes. In that country, there are people who regard themselves as higher than anybody. Let me give you one example. Not long ago, how many Oromo nationals were in broad daylight slaughtered in Benishangul? How many Oromo nationals were murdered in Wallo Special Zone? Did the media in Ethiopia say a word about that massacre? Did they say? I have not seen. Nothing was mentioned, which means the Oromo life, the life of other subject people are never seriously taken. When the Abiy's regime destroys Amharic speakers, it is blamed on the Oromo Liberation Army. Essentially, what lies behind Oromo Liberation Army? The Oromo people. It is the Oromo people who are the entire media establishment. They even fooled the media outside because they have access through governmental services. They have their men here and there. They cook up and then spread, whether it is through Reuters or through F. What was government engineered killings, Ola was blamed for that. And it was the media. Remember, I said Abiy's regime finances anti-Oromo media for daily dehumanizing. In fact, for the first time, it was exactly 3 years ago in July 2019 when I went to Ethiopia after 4 decades living in the diaspora, when I realized unbelievable hatred for the Oromo as well as for Oromia. Even 3 years ago, the media in Finfinne, once or twice I took the liberty deliberately listening to AF radios. There are about 50 of them broadcasting in a single language. You can speculate which language it is. Of course, it is Amharic.
Mm.
Most of what is dismantle Oromia. how to destroy Oromo nationalism. Openly, not hidden, openly. Abiy paid 13 million US dollars to finance the Isat media, which now disintegrates into two. He was financing them, all the medias there. So to answer your question, what makes Ethiopia different from other African countries? I can't compare that country political culture with other countries, with other African countries. Several African
Mm.
countries learned the importance of living together on the basis of equality, respecting the rights of population. You know, most people you may not realize. I taught South African history for 3 decades, undergraduate as well as graduate at graduate level. There are 8 official languages in a single country, South Africa. And this now our people are to be denied even the simplest of things, using their language, developing their language to administer themselves in their own land. There is not a single, I suspect, there is not a single Oromo national who owns property in Bahadar or Gondar or Delhi, probably, let's say, I don't know, who owns wealth in Oromia, who inherited all the buildings the TPLF leaders left, who today controls the commercial sector of Ethiopia. It is all the Amhara elite. They control the economy. They buy daily the land of the our peasants. What will happen to those peasants? I have a friend who just returned from Ethiopia 3 days ago. We were together yesterday at our house. She says, I have never seen so many Oromo women begging on the streets of Mfinne, in Bishoftu, in Adama. She went all the way to Harar, to Dredawa. Everywhere the beggars are Oromo women, Oromo men. Most people may not believe, even the Oromos were really in so many ways dehumanized. There were few Oromo nationals who were beggars because they depended on their land. Today, most beggars, you can clearly check this from friends who visit there. Most beggars are Oromos, mainly Oromo women. Who are these? These were people who lost their land, who were supporting themselves few years ago, supporting their families. Several 100,000 people have been displaced. What is their future? Begging? Nothing. Or becoming soldiers for Abiy's never-ending war. They are this sister, our friend who returned. She went to the countryside where we come from. She said there are countless number of buses filled by Oromo youths. They captured them from everywhere. Why? For training, and then sending them to death. The only industry Abiy established is killing machine, war, essentially destroying. There is nothing like war that destroys. Since he came to there was honestly, I'm not exaggerating, when an Oromo or Oromos were not killed a single day in 4 years and 4 months when they were not killed. Now it is at the highest level. And what Abiy wants is to restore the classical Abyssinian system, essentially the system based on one language, one identity, one culture, one national identity, which means Ethiopia is allergic to diversity. Honest to God, I doubt if there is any society that so diversity. The world is a diverse place, everywhere, diverse place. Any society that does not accept the reality of diversity and then dealing with it will destroy itself, as it has happened time and again in human history.
Mm.
To answer your question in very briefly, the political culture, the sense of an iota of democratic culture that restrains people listening to the other side, only mine. This madness for land, capturing land from others. Why were the Karayu Abagada destroyed? Because they wanted to take over Karayu land. Now more than half of Karayu land is controlled by Amara peasants. In many areas, what they want is really to move their population to settle in Walaga. They openly say, Walaga is ours, Shawa
Mm.
is ours. That is what they say. This is what makes Ethiopia different from other countries. Other countries. Even this notion, we all own the country. They will never say that. They own, they are the class. The chosen population who state. Any people who claim that they own state, they will destroy that state because human beings resist. Human beings resist, and the resistance of our people will continue, will intensify, and it is the obligation of every Oromo national who thinks about her people, his people, to support Wabo. Today, what stands between the destruction and the total takeover of Oromo land is the Wabo. It is Wabo resistance, and that to be supported. Honest to God, anyone who thinks rationally, supporting Wabo is an investment in the future of our people, even other people in the area. Our responsibility is to do that as much as possible. I don't claim everyone will be convinced, but anyone with common sense, any rational human being who really thinks about the future, when our people will be without land, once you become landless, our people become the Palestinians who are driven from their land, refugees on their own land, or like Native Americans. The only thing that saves the future of our people is supporting Wabo. There is no other way. The other way is pipe dream. There is no peaceful resistance in Ethiopia. It had never worked. It will not work in the future. Never. Who chose peaceful, you know, uh, uh, for the country to change? They all paid with their lives. The same thing will repeat to those who still dream about peaceful resistance in that country. For me, there is only one hope for the future of our people, that is Wabo. We have to support them. We have to say every day as much as possible. there is so much propaganda campaign against Wabo. You know, there is Amharic saying, if you speak Amharic, they say, Tor yalfattaun ware ifatawal. This is part of their culture. What one is not able to defeat through battle, you defeat through propaganda. And there is so much. I sent to you a short article, just a 3-page article that was issued, not article actually, a press report by Oromia Support Group, which clearly shows the killing at Tole in Gimbi area was carried out by Abiy's killing squad, killers. Who is blamed? It is Wabo, it is the Oromo who are blamed. We don't have a massive media campaign, but if everyone shows concern for this, absolutely. And those of us who are lucky enough to live either in North America or in Europe or Australia, we have really moral obligation to be the voice of our voiceless people who are daily victimized. Who are they? Is there a day when houses are not destroyed? Now in the center, in the western part of Shawa, hundreds of houses are destroyed with everything, which means people are utterly exposed to hunger, to unbelievable hunger, misery. This is nothing but committing silent genocide against population. And it is the same thing in Walaga area. The same thing. Where there is no internet, no electricity, no running water, where individuals are just killed because they are suspicious. Only in Ethiopia, where you can then blame as a terrorist letter. This is what makes Ethiopia different from other countries in a broad daylight, and the media is dominated by one dominant elite, and they daily undermine the death and destruction of Oromo. Government does, they blame it on Ola and the Oromo people. And this must really be exposed. I think it is in the best interest of the Amara people themselves to understand the danger Abiy's regime is posing to everyone in that country. The man is mad with power. Absolutely. You know, I've said a lot, but when I was by people who worked with this man describe him as a pathological liar, a sick man, essentially a man who believes in killing. It is he who planned everything. And then his killers. Remember earlier I said they established killer squad. I know the cities, especially the area I come from, where his killer squads are operating. We have even the names of the generals and the colonels who command this. The the taxes our people pays salaries of this killer squad. Why do I mention this? Those who understand the reality of our situation, especially if you all are, we all have relatives back home, we have to encourage them by every means. You know, what people should not pay taxes to the government that destroys you. that takes over your land, that destroys everything you own, dismembers, yeah, uses, and then throws them in the forest to be food for hyenas. I have never, ever, really, reading in history, never seen a time like this when the life of an Oromo is never regarded even as a wild animal. People hunt for meat. Our people are reduced to our people must resist this to change their situation. It was Cairo resistance. They are now victims. They are in prison. And our people have to be the voice for the Kairos who are in detention. Fortunately, probably a significant number of Kairos realized if they lived, they will be killed. So they went to the field, joined the struggle. They are the one who are now leading this really struggle. It makes me personally very proud when our youth say enough of slavery, endless hundreds of our people must achieve their sovereignty again, establish their own government, and then others who live in Oromia will live in peace with our people, not plundering Oromo resources and not every day insulting the Oromo as if they are animals. Some even regard them as this beast. I heard a commentator on television in especially Cairo, as beast. It is the speaker himself, really, who is the beast, who characterizes other human beings as animals. I don't know if I have answered your question. Ethiopia is very different from other African countries because the political culture has no substance, a democratic culture, no substance. You know, when they wrote the Constitution, especially the 1995 Constitution, although the Constitution is very, for the first time, the most radical Constitution in the history of that country, they borrowed ideas of democracy from outside. They should have interviewed Gada leaders, learn a little bit. There are wonderful books which deals with Gada system. They can learn, at least in all the Oromo, to administer themselves under the principle of Gada rule. The people who were in power in 1991 are still behind the scene. Still, they are the ones who are pushing everything as if it is their property. Under the Gada system, no one owns a state. You are in power for a limited period of time. America adopted this system. Our people were practicing that. I'm not exaggerating. Read Asmarom Legacy's Oromo Democracy. You can clearly see indigenous African democracy. Those ideas are really an investment in the future of our people. Yeah.
Thank you for that response as well. Very thoroughly highlighting the mentality, the politics, the kind of psychological state that is informing a lot of the unfortunate and horrible decisions that are going into the governance of Ethiopia. At this time, we've hit our time. You've touched on a lot of different things. This video will be available on YouTube, hopefully, for people to come back to listen to again, and to inspire people to dig into more resources and learn about this. And as you said, be the voice for the voiceless who are back home dealing with this on a daily basis. There's also two articles that Professor Hassan has shared with me that I will make available for our audience to, as a starting point to learn some more information. But other than that, that concludes our discussion for today. And again, thank you so much, Professor Hassan, for taking the time to be here and to share your knowledge on the history and the current events that are happening.
I want to thank you so very much for arranging this.
Of course.
It is only through education minds are changed and people develop new perspective, and discussing these issues is always very crucial, very, very
Absolutely.
important. Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity, and uh, and thank you for the questions you prepared. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you.